Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the ICCS Summer School, if I haven't met you yet, and welcome if I have met you too. And welcome to this session on using GitHub effectively. The plan here is to sort of try and help you all get familiar with the features that GitHub provides in terms of using it as a platform for developing software. We want to talk about some of the best practices that you might want to employ when developing code, and particularly when working collaboratively. That's with teams within your institution, between institutions, and also if you're developing some kind of open source code or contributing there as well. These are the kind of practices that you should be familiar with when you're developing this way. And the way we've structured it, I think, is kind of unique, and hopefully you'll enjoy this afternoon, because we're going to try and show you the development process through the eyes of a software engineer, and in particular, a research software engineer. So we're a weird bunch. You might have had a brief spiel about us earlier. But we are allegedly professional software engineering expertise. So we have some kind of specific domain knowledge. Quite often you'll see HPC systems, multi-threading, MPI, GPU. You might see some kind of architectural design stuff as well, some industry experience. But we also have this tie to academia and scientific research. We have academic backgrounds, we're based at institutions, we're all based at Cambridge. And that puts us in a really interesting position because we can consult on scientific projects and understand that context and that kind of demand in terms of the need to publish and produce output. But also we're able to provide some kind of technical contribution akin to that you might see with professional software engineers. And something we really like to do, particularly as we all remember what our PhDs were like, is to promote best practices in software engineering. Things like testing, things like how you might go about sharing code, documenting it, things that I'm guilty of not doing myself during my PhD. So that's really going to be the thrust of this talk. How do we do that on GitHub? And very quickly, the ICCS, I think, is really cool and set up quite well because we have these RSEs that are available to work with VESRI science teams and provide that ongoing technical support. So you're all here, we're all here, so come and talk to us in the breaks if you have any questions about your repositories, your codes, any issues you're having. All come and find us during these dedicated open office hour sessions that we're having. They're in your timetable. This is a slightly older version, but on Tuesday at 3:30, and on Wednesday at 2, and Wednesday at 3:30, you can book a slot. There's a URL in the digital version of the pack. But if not, and we're available, just drop in and have a chat about your projects that you're working on and see if we can help at all. Had to make a few assumptions when making this talk. For which I'm going to have to apologise. But I don't think this one's going to be an issue. The first one is that we assume you know how to program. In a 90-minute talk, I don't think we're able to cover that. But we're also going to assume that you know something about Git or some kind of version control system. This isn't going to be a talk about how to use Git. We will cover some of those bases, and you don't need that knowledge to understand and get a lot out of this talk. But if you really want that information, then you should check out this link here. It's also in your pack. And this goes to last year's summer school where Dominic Orchard gave a talk about using Git and the theory behind that. So if you want to get that extra reading, do check out that amazing video. So the thrust of this talk, yes, talking about GitHub, which is a cloud-based service for software development. It was purchased by Microsoft in 2018, and a lot of features came in around that time, which I love to do a song and dance about. It's the largest source code host in the world. 372 million repositories are out there. I think there are 100 million public ones. I can't quite remember these figures as of June. You'll see them in universities, you'll see them in industry. This is a great one to get your teeth into initially. The underlying technology is Git for the version control system, for tracking changes, adding files, how it talks between different copies of the repository, which we'll go into later a little bit in this talk. But I think the real power of GitHub is in all these extra features on top and the whole ecosystem around it. So I spent a few years in industry doing as a software engineer. So I love some of these project management tools. I love the idea of making tasks, filling up a backlog, assigning them to people, creating swim lanes, doing Scrum, things like that. No, like Scrum, no. But I think more generally speaking, public bug tracking and reporting, people can make feature requests and then your developers can work on them. You can standardize them too, so you have a consistent amount of input and a reference material to work from. There's an online editor built in for making changes and merging changes. It integrates with desktop editors like VS Code. Yes, I'm a fanboy. And now there's a desktop client, and you've got automated testing, which means for free, when someone makes a change to your code, you can validate that change. It's not going to break anything at all. And I think that's where most of the power lies, and we're going to go through a lot of these features today. I have to say that our alternative platforms, a little bit of a disclaimer here, not paid by GitLab or anything, GitHub or anything. But yeah, GitLab you'll see a lot in academia. These ones you might see a lot more in industry, pushing continuous CD, what's it called? Continuous distribution, continuous development. And you'll see lots of project management tools as well. And GitHub's kind of cool because it encompasses a lot of these tools. So I think this is a great place to get started today. And very recently we had a meeting with the esteemed Professor Joe Bloggs. Met with them on Friday, and they have made a formal request for help on their repository. It's a very new repository, but they've made a good start with it, and they seem to have this bug that they can't fix. And they've also specifically asked us about adding some more features. So what we're going to do in this session is look at their repository, go through it and try and help them out as much as possible in the next 85 minutes. How exciting is that? So when you come to a GitHub repository, it will look something like this. I hope you can all see that from where you are. If not, we can turn the lights down. Everyone happy?
Yes, it's hard with you.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Can we turn the lights down a bit? Is that possible? Or just at the front? Is that better? Yeah, we had to go earlier and the projector's a bit fuzzy. But what you can kind of see here is that there are all the source code is sort of hosted at the top, and then when you make a project, you'll be prompted to make this README, which really acts as your kind of home page or splash page for your project. So this README here gives us quite a lot of information, and there are a few things we like to see when you sort of turn up to a project. So what's really promising here is we know about the intent. We know it's a reverse Polish notation calculator written in Python. We know how it operates, which is kind of cool. They've given us some information here about how to use it. They've even given us a command line instruction to run. So we haven't got to go and ask the developer actually how it's intended to be used. And what's going on down here? They give us a nice diagram to explain what's going on. It's interesting. We'll review that in a moment. And we have an example to compare to, so we know our environment's set up correctly, and we even have installation instructions. So we could copy and paste this into a terminal. We could then try the commands locally, and if we get the same results, we know any issues that we're facing aren't due to our machine. It's probably something to do with the repository. And that means we can contribute without worrying that we're wasting people's time. Right, I'm quite happy with this repository. I seem to know how to run it, but I don't know about you, I haven't come across a reverse Polish notation calculator before. Is that a computer science thing? Simon, have you got any experience with RCN calculators?
RPN calculator.
RPN calculators, look at that, I haven't got a clue.
Yes, it's a stack-based calculator, and I was looking at this repository earlier, and I noticed that the developers had actually provided us with some documentation, and they put it in the docs directory, which was very nice. And there's a GIF, which I saw actually kind of explains what's going on with this calculator. So you have an input and you have a stack. It's pretty simple stuff. A stack is a computer science data structure. We just push things onto it and pop things off. So the way that the code would work is it would look at the first token in the input, which in this case is 1. Look at that. And it pushes that, because it's a number, onto the stack. So then that just appears on the stack. The top element of the stack is 1, nothing else on the stack. We then examine the second element of the input, and that would be a 4. We're going to push that onto the stack as well, and that will give us 4 and 1 on the stack reading from the top. This is just, just so you understand what's going on with the rest of the code. Then we look at the next token, which is the plus operator, and that's going to take the top 2 elements of the stack and sum them together in some working space. So 4 plus 1. Okay, we can work that out. That's going to be 5. And then it takes that result and pushes it back onto the stack. That's all done by the plus operator. Like so. Do it. Yes. We look at the next element in the input, and that's a 3, and it's a number, so we're just going to push it onto the stack. That will displace the 5 and push it down. So we now have 3 and 5 on the stack. And the final operator is the times operator, denoted by asterisk here. And that, just like the plus operator, takes the top 2 elements, multiplies them together, and gives us 15, which we then push onto the stack. And you would conventionally leave the stack, perhaps with the top element being the result, or you might have something which pops that top element off for you to read. So that's a reverse Polish notation calculator. And it's convenient because you don't have to worry about operator precedence. It's all implicit in the order of the operations in the input. So,
Welcome. So, yeah, thank you, Simon. I think that's a pretty clear explanation. I now have a sort of rough idea of what an RPN calculator is. I also seem to have a good idea, I think, of how to run the code. And we read through the doc.
do you want to plug in?
Excellent. Ben, what kind of thing would you do if you're looking at a repository for the first time? What kind of steps would you take next?
Well,
Oh.
using your computer here, that's fine.
Actually, do you know what, Ben, before we jump in, I've got to change a plan. I'm going to change up the running order here.
What?
Guys, if you've got a laptop, you can follow along and you can also contribute to this repository. So what we're about to do, what I was about to ask Ben to do there was sort of review the code and have a look. But actually, you can do it too. So if you want to make an issue request, if you see anything that you dislike, anything you would like to improve, anything which strikes you as odd, you can literally add an issue and then we'll review it at the end of the session. I think that'd be kind of interesting. And we go through the triage process of how we'd go about dealing with public issue requests. And also, if you want to make any changes, what you can do is you can press this button here to fork your own copy of the repository. And what you can do is if you just select the main branch, you don't need to copy all the other ones. We just want to make changes. You can branch off main. We'll talk about this a little bit more later. But for the time being, if you want to make your own branch, your own fork, you can press this button here. And then you can, oh yeah, bad name, isn't it? And then, there we are. So now I've got a copy of the repository. Oh no, I see what you're saying, Ben. Yeah, sorry.
Well, you didn't change the owner. But it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
that's okay. So what will happen here is instead of Cambridge ICCS owning it, you will own it. And then this will be your copy of the repository, which you can make changes to. And then you can request your changes come into our repository. That's sort of the natural way of contributing to projects that you're not affiliated to. Obviously, we're part of the Cambridge ICCS, so we're going to make some direct changes today. But in general, the fork workflow is a good way of going. Yeah, sorry for interrupting you there, Ben, for a second.
No problem.
Yeah, if you want to have a go, guys, do submit some issues and, yeah, follow along.
Just before I get started on this, could you make sure, could somebody, Simon, make sure that we delete that, because it might mess up our URL.
Oh, yeah.
No, do it on another PC, and we'll get started on this. Cheers. Right, no problem. It's fun doing this stuff.
Go this way.
So,
If we move your mic player,
yeah, thanks for that. Is that any better?
yeah, so I've got a thumbs up from Jack.
That'll do. All right. So let's go back to the original repository because we're off by one. Here we go. Okay. So just now Alex has talked about a couple of things on that are immediately apparent on the GitHub view that we haven't really gone over. So let's review some of the stuff that GitHub gives you immediately. We have the code view. By default, you can see the files in your repository, which are all version controlled using Git. One of the other big things that GitHub gives you is a place for discussion and a place to discuss, well, both potential changes and changes that aren't yet prepared at all. So when we've been mentioning the word issues, this is where you're able to have directed discussions on things like bug reports, feature requests, things that you've perhaps thought of in your team that you'd like to add but you haven't started on yet. Anything really that you'd like to, anything that you find useful that would be able to have a public discussion about rather than having it behind closed doors. So that's the huge kind of key thing about GitHub is that the more information you put on your repository on the issue issues, on the PRs, in documentation, the more stuff you have to go back through and help other people help you. So currently there's no issues. I'll skip issues for now because pull requests has a run next to it. Because there's already a pull request on this repository. Pull requests are, in my head, I'm not sure everyone will agree with me here, but pull requests in my head are really the same as issues. They're still the same discussion, but you also have an associated set of changes. And at any time you can say, I'm happy with these changes, and you can merge them, you can add them into your main repository, and now you have those changes added to your repository. Before you make that merge, your main repository doesn't get edited. So it's kind of a very safe way to do development. If you want to have multiple people, including like people outside your team, working on your repository, pull requests and branches is the way to go. So let's have a. We good? Sorry. Let's have a look at the existing pull request here. Add GitHub Actions workflow for running unit tests. So I made this earlier. I gave a decent explanation of what this is doing. I added a quick PyTest unit test, something that wasn't already there, and I've added a workflow to run them automatically in GitHub Actions. But apparently the test is failing. So I'm scrolling down. Okay, cool. So someone's made a change to our repository here. It still needs some work, but I think it's fairly obvious I think there's enough information there for anyone to pick up the work there. So do we have any volunteers from my two lovely assistants?
Yeah, I think I'm a big fan of GitHub Actions and unit testing. I think I made that pretty clear. And yeah, please give me that one.
Great.
I'll get on that straight away.
So to kind of link this back to the project management bits, GitHub likes to give you little ways to handle your repository, handle your issues and your pull requests. So you can conveniently assign somebody like so on the right, and they'll get, that's Alex, they'll get a notification, they'll get 500 emails, it's really funny sometimes. Cool. So we'll... Yes, please.
So what's the difference between reviewers and asynchronous?
It's mostly up to you.
If you repeat the question, Ben, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I'll repeat the question. So we had Eva asked, what's the difference between a reviewer on the right, above, at the top, and an assignee, which I've just done. My answer is there's not too much difference, really. You can add as many reviewers as you want, you can add as many assignees as you want. The only thing is reviewers have a bit more integration with some more of GitHub's features, whereas assignees don't. There's nothing special you can do as an assignee, to my understanding. It's just more labeling. It's just more ways to have directed conversations. You don't really need, if you would like to, you can always just at people, and that's basically the same as assignee. So it's all up to you. It's like, everything on the right is just options, stuff that you can use if you like. So no real difference between reviewers and assignees, unless, can I feel the question instead of finishing? No, I'll finish my thought. It's up to you to use reviewers or assignees as you wish. If you would like, you use reviewers, and it means people can then click through to your pull request and start a review. We're not going to show that today, but it's simply another feature of GitHub. If you'd like to use reviews, then go ahead, add people to reviewers instead. Alas, it is kind of up to you.
Can I just add something to that? So, yeah, I guess in a sense... Oh yeah, sorry, microphone again. Yes, keep going. So yeah, Ben's right. You can sort of use it how you like. I think a very common way of using it, and a way that we use it within ICCS is that the assignee is the person who's going to go and do the work. They're the person who's going to go and action this thing and implement that feature, fix that bug or whatever. And the reviewer is someone else, not the assignee, not the person who's done the work, but someone else who can look at it and give comments and say, is this good, is this bad, what could be improved, and so on. And GitHub gives you a nice interface then for being a reviewer and adding comments to the code and doing a kind of code review, which I think we're not.
We are going to do a drive-by review. So it
great.
will be,
So we
will
will
be
see
there,
that.
we think.
We are. Thanks.
We will see
Thanks
soon.
very much. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Thank you.
If we have time.
So to continue, we've assigned Alex to this. He'll do the work. Someone else might have a look at it later as a reviewer. But we'll move on. I think.
You could assign me, Ben, if you want, as a reviewer.
Shall we? You know what? Yeah, sure. All right, here's the Simon. Okay, so there's nothing else on the repository currently, but we have been tasked with improving the code quality and taking a general look. So I think let's take a general look. We can use the code browser on GitHub is fairly nice. I like to click this little tab here, and then we get a sort of classic style directory traversal tree. Let's take a look in source. We have Python files, I'm not surprised. Let's take a look at your stack.py first. Simon earlier talked about how an RPN calculator usually uses a stack for its expression evaluation. This is about as simple as it gets, so I'm happy with that. RPN calc here. I can see main. It's doing some early parsing. That makes sense. I remember reading in the review that this was that it splits by a single space. Okay, I'm not interested in anything else there. Calculator.py. Process the token. Def pass. Okay. So this is seeming to be the kind of meat of the program. We're matching tokens which have come from somewhere, and we're checking whether they match an operator that we know, and if they don't, then we treat it as a float. So I think that was explained in the review. That's nice. Thinking back to the email from Joe Blogs, they expressed interest in having a modular operator here. This is probably the sort of place that we'd add it. We'd make another case. It's a binary operator, so we pop two elements off the stack, and then we push a result. So we've kind of done half of the work here. So, but I've got stuff to go do, so I'm not going to be able to actually do this work myself. So I'll just prep an issue that kind of explains that the catalogs all this. Oh no, I want to make a new tab. But I've learned how to make a new tab. Okay. So let's briefly make an issue for adding the modular operator. As requested by Joe Blogs. Recommend. I know from using Python that it already has a modular operator, and a couple of other programming languages I use use the percent sign for modulo. So let's recommend that. So let's give a quick example, I think, as well, just so people can have a quick test. Whoever's implementing this can kind of assert that what they've done is correct. 10 modulo 3 is 1. I'm not stupid. And we'll give the RPN version as well. In RPN would be 3, 10%. Cool. Okay. And then at the end of it, stack would have 1 on top. Okay. And the last thing that we'll do is since we already kind of found where we think this would be this would be added. I can add a link to not just a file, but actually a specific line as well. So I'll tag this line here. Well, maybe I'll tag the end of it, because I think it should go after that one. And I'll copy this URL. Alex, is
I've changed it. I think it's, I can't remember. My
Command
command,
C or-
it's Command C on the Mac, isn't it,
Lovely,
guys?
lovely,
And then
Thank you.
Command V. Bad
Easy.
choice I made when I joined. So I'm gonna say.
Um,
That works excellent.
likely add this code in calculator.py. Yeah. Okay, just before we submit that, I'm using some markup here, some syntax, which will prettify this when it gets actually printed out. If I press preview, then yeah, my indentations get changed to kind of typewriter style, and the link gets kind of handled nicely. So it's looking to where we wrote. That looks good. Something to note here that I was conscious when I was writing this issue, but I think it's worthwhile being clear. Is there's perhaps a certain way to write good issues, and I think the best issue is in a perfect world where you write enough detail, enough explanation, give enough context that anybody involved in the project would be able to pick up the issue and continue it in some way. You can't expect to add enough information so that the answer is immediately available, because then you've kind of done all of the work already. But if you can make sure that if you use issues such that the next step in the task is always apparent, it's superb. It means if someone ends up going off for a month, you can still continue work and stuff. The more information on GitHub and not in someone's head, the better. So, enough dilly-dallying, we'll submit this. So here's another issue for us to do. We've got to do some assigning. Simon?
Go on then.
Great. Did we rehearse this?
Never
Not
seen this
very well.
repository, by the way.
Great. Okay. So there's already a couple of tasks that we've got to do in this repository now. I think I'm going to head off, let my friends take over and have a go at some of the stuff I've assigned them to.
Excellent, Ben. Yeah, I think esteemed Professor Joe Blogs are very happy with this as an initial set of work to getting on with, I think. One more thing that I like to do when I approach a project, and that's, again, because I spent all those years in industry, it wasn't that long, but, is that I like to create project boards. And that's because I like this backlog view, this task view. So at the top of GitHub, you have this projects tab, and you can link an existing project, and you can link projects across multiple repositories. They aren't tied one-to-one like that. Or you can create a new one, and we'll do that today, just quickly make a new project. And what this does is it gives you a few view options. You have your backlog view, or your issues and your pull requests stacking up. Or you have this board view, which looks a lot like the classic Scrum, Kanban style thing. Anyone use like Trello or productivity apps like that, you might recognize this sort of view. I love that kind of stuff. But this is really cool because it gives you a very transparent way of communicating the status of work items. So right now, I've got 3 columns with a to-do status, and then progress status, and a done status. They're all empty. And you can quickly add all of your cards from any repository that you're linked with. That doesn't say Jurassic at all, that says Git. There we go. So we can add the pull request that we're working on. There's been a few issues added. Thanks, guys. Keep them coming in. This is great. I'm liking these. And we'll add the modular. Actually, that's all of them. Let's add all of them for now. So let's do that. So yeah, you can manually add items like this, and then they'll populate the to-do column with cards. And then you can communicate very effectively the status of any item. So I've already volunteered to do this GitHub Actions workflow in the unit test. Simon is starting to investigate this modular operator, so that can move to the in progress column. But it doesn't have to be so manual like this. You can also automate things. And one of the coolest things is that whenever so you can go to, it's too quick, I'm going to go back into that again. You can go to workflows in the top right of the page, and you can create new automation. So you can do things like automatically adding items to a project whenever something gets created. So I can just quickly create a little thing like this. This is just a little bonus feature for you guys. But whenever there's an issue, whenever there's a PR, we're going to add an item to the project. And that's really cool. And there's some other things you can do as well. So you can change, I don't know, let's say when pull requests are added to the project, we can sort of imply work's already been done when you made a pull request, right? It's already contained some kind of code. So that's in progress automatically. And this kind of automation saves you a lot of time, particularly when you've got engineers that are focusing on development. You don't necessarily need them to do the admin. This sort of keeps that communication automatic and transparent and quite quick. So one of the things I like to do at the start of the day, and it's 3:30, which is a good time to start work, I think, is go onto my project board, and yeah, I've been allocated to adding GitHub Actions workflow, so I'm going to open up that PR just by clicking on it like that. Let's clear up my tabs, and let's get to work.
Well, hang on, Alex, though.
Hello.
Because you were saying, you're almost implying that this is the way to do it with
it
project
is,
boards.
Simon.
This
You're
again,
right.
yeah, this again. No rehearsals.
I know you have feelings about this.
Well, and GitHub is a tool, and how you use it is up to you and your collaborators. So you can use the project boards, as Alex said, very industrial, Scrum, that sort of thing, or you can not use them at all. You can use issues in a very formal way, or you can sort of pop them in, work on them collaboratively. You can have pull requests which must have an issue before they're created. You can have pull requests which just describe work that's being done. The important thing is that you collaborate and you agree with how you're doing these things. So don't feel bad if you're not using project boards, or you don't feel that you have to use things in a particular way, as long as you all agree that the way that you are using them is working for you. And with that, back to Alex.
Thank you, Simon. It's a very valid point. I've worked on multiple teams, and yeah, they're very different ways of doing things. But today I'm going to assign myself king, and I'm going to go this way. So I'm going to start working on this PR. So esteemed Professor Joe Bloggs has added another simple Pi unit test for their subtraction method. And they've configured a workflow file to automatically run this test using GitHub Actions. Love it. Let's have a look at that in a moment. But the new test is failing, but they haven't looked into it yet. Okay, so that gives us a good starting point. I think we can examine their change. So the PR, again, it's linked to files. We'll inspect those in a moment. And it takes a snapshot in time and then updates as you make more changes to the development branch. So this change here has happened on a branch separate from main. And if we go down, you can see they've added a couple of commits. And they've got a failing commit here, adding a subtraction unit test. I feel like this. Aha, what's happening here, guys? It looks like all checks have failed. What's happened? It's failing after 6 seconds. So GitHub is telling me straight away that these tests, okay, so it's running tests, which is good. That means their workflow file was probably working. But the test is failing. That's exactly what's being reported. Good. This is a good service ticket. So what we can do is we can click on this details item and we can look at the test log. And this is exactly the kind of thing you see from a command line output if you're running it on your local machine. It's just running it in the cloud for free. So on Linux, they are running testcalculator.py, and here's a test subtract method that's been added. That's excellent. And what have they done? They have provided the arguments 2, 1, and minus to this RPN calculator, and they're asserting that the output of that will be 1. You don't really need to do the details too much beyond that, but yeah, they're asserting that the output should be 1. However, the computer is actually asserting that they're finding that it's -1. So that seems to be where the conflict's lying. What they're doing is adding 2 to the top of the stack, and they're pushing 1 down, and then they're doing the minus operation, so they're popping 1, -2, which, if you carry the -1, I make that to be. So the computer's probably right here, and yeah, it looks like this isn't anything wrong with the calculator as such. This is probably something that's wrong with the test. This is sort of a good way of diagnosing issues. You don't even need to necessarily look at code to figure out roughly what's going wrong. Thanks to these test logs. These test logs will persist as well. So it can be useful to go back and investigate later. So what we can do is we can examine the change. Yeah, there's 2 files that have been changed. They've changed this workflow file, this pytest.yaml, which we'll talk about in a moment. And they've also added this test here to the calculator.py as we expected, and the assert is with what we think is the incorrect value. So what we can do is change that to -1, and then what GitHub will do when we do that is it will run this pytest.yaml file. So what that's doing is just giving a set of instructions to run GitHub Actions automated testing. So on push to main or any pull request that opens, which has been opened, which is great, that's what this pull request has happened to it, while that test has run, or when it synchronizes with main and all sorts of things, it will run a test on Linux, or Ubuntu specifically, checking out this version of the repo, running Python, and running all tests. That's a great workflow file. So that explains why that file works, why the test did run. So what that means is we can simply fix this error in the test file, and then we can rely on that workflow file to assess our change. And something you can do in GitHub, which is super cool, is if you literally press the dot button on your keyboard, you can make direct changes in the browser. You don't need to open up an editor or do anything locally. You can do it all inside GitHub. I love GitHub. But the important thing to note is that this change is happening on the bottom here. It tells you it's happening on the CI more test branch. It's not happening on main. Because we press dot on that pull request page, it links straight to the branch where that development is happening. And if you were to select the branch from the repository, you could also pick which branch you develop from. There's a little drop down at the top of the repository. So what we can do now is we can just quickly look at the change. This is what's happening. This is before, which is what's happening on main. This is what's happening in CI more tests, and we can just change this value to be -1. We think that's the right value, don't we? And then what we can do is we can directly commit and push from browser into the online version of the code. And obviously committing is an art form. You want something very, very explicit, very concise, saying a lot, but with very few words. It's a very difficult thing to do. What are we doing here? We are fixing, this fixes test subtract by changing incorrect assert. I think that's a very useful message. I don't know. I've been doing this for a while, and yeah. It's not for me to judge. So we just press commit and push, and then we can go back to the repository, press the burger menu, back to the repository. We can go to the pull request, and we can see there's a little orange dot next to our PR, and if we scroll down, the checks are running. So we can look at the log, doing the live testing. It's just gone green. So GitHub has given us the green light for this change. So we actually, no issues with test calculate.py, all tests pass. So I'm pretty satisfied that this change has fixed the issue that esteemed Professor Joe Bloggs was facing. So we go back to the pull request, and then we could merge it. Simon, are you happy with my change? Would you like to do a quick review? Would you like to do
just an over-the-shoulder review,
yeah,
perhaps.
Did you like that? I think there's nothing
I was-
controversial there.
I was paying attention. I wasn't doing other things. No, I agree with your analysis.
And you're happy with
your
the
fix.
change of the pre-existing change? That
Yes,
that was good. I think
yes,
so.
I agree. So I could go back now and, on my laptop, which is all the way over there, say that I approve the review, but that's a really long way. So I'm just going to say, yeah, Alex, just merge, go straight off. Again, as I say, whatever works for your team, right? As long as it's consistent and agreed.
The
The best practice would be to.
Yeah, the traceability would be there publicly, but we did do a review, so
Yeah, I'll comment on it for you.
thank you. So I'm going to just confirm that. So I'll press the merge button, and that sends the change from our development branch, CI more tests, into main. And then if we go back to the top of the repository and press code, we can come back to the main branch. You can see that my merge pull request has come into main. You can see there's a little yellow dot, which means my test is still running. And there you go, look at that, perfect timing. Thank you, GitHub. Test pass, which means there's no issues when it came up from the development branch. There's no merge issues or anything like that, which means I can go back to the pull request. Actually, I'm going to quickly just show you something. So as you develop as you create more branches for more and more issues, you'll start filling up this list of branches that you can pick between. And I mean, when you get to 100 and when you get to 1,000, that becomes a pain. So best practice at this point is to delete any pull requests that you're finished with. So because we know this change is valid in main, it isn't going to cause us any issue if we press delete. We aren't going to need to use it again later. we can just get rid of this branch. That really reduces the clutter in this sort of shared team repository. But you can always restore it later, so it's not like you're losing information. You're not losing this pull request that will always exist. So it has merged, but in a closed pull request, you can always refer to it later, and that really helps you trace problems if it causes any issues. Anyway, that's my bit of work done. It looks like we have continuous integration testing in this repository now. And if we go to the in progress column, oh, look at that, it's already gone. And if I could find my scroll bar, we would see, I think, if I zoom out, I'm going to do this, there you go. You can see it's been moved automatically to the done column. There is an automation action inside this project, which means my card has moved over to the finished state, which means anyone who's doing any work now, they can use this change in their branch. So I love these project boards. So that's my bit work done. I know Simon's about to do something. Looks like he's about to add the modulo operator. So I'm going to give him some space to do that. So there's one.
So what would you recommend then for communicating back to the professor? Like, how would you inform her that what you had to do to change this?
I think at the end of a session, like a sort of period, I'd go back and I think I'd confirm the full set of changes. I'm not going to go and say, hi esteemed Professor Joe Bloggs, I've just finished your unit testing.
We could email, maybe provide links to
yeah,
the pull requests.
I think a summary email would be good. If they're on the project, they'll automatically get emails when there's been changes. So GitHub will tell them.
But Joe Bloggs might not be on the project.
They might not be in the project. But yeah, I think at the end, I think it's good to have touch base with your client team. So on regular occasions, just updating them on the status rather than every single change. So yeah, I'm not going to do it right now, but maybe the end of the week. Maybe we've got through a handful of issues. Right now we have a certain amount of work they want us to do. So we're going to do a couple of items. So yeah, the bare minimum, at least, yeah.
Okay, so if she's on, you can tag her, but otherwise you recommend her updating at some point when it makes sense at the right granularity for that collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, if they're involved in the review process, that would also help. They'll be able to know what's going on. But yeah, I think if they're not that involved at that level, touching base regularly.
It'd be whatever you'd agreed on, right?
Yeah,
it's been agreed on. Nice.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like it. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah.
Just keep saying that. I'll be always correct. Right. And we've thrown around the phrase best practice and good practice a few times, which is good. But I think it's always useful if someone says this is best practice, ask them why. So with Alex, he says delete the branch, that's best practice. And then he explained why. It's because you don't want dozens of branches cluttering up your workspace. So it's painless to get rid of them, and you can always bring them back. So I have got something I need to do. So our issues board is actually ticking over very nicely. I've been trying to keep an eye on it. Oh yeah, we've got lots of things going on here. But I've got my little icon here, that's me. So I'm going to go to add modulo operator. And because I'm assigned to this issue, GitHub actually provides a way I could sort of show me the things I'm assigned to do. And it also would be sending me dozens of emails about things I'm assigned to do and stuff like that. So that's another reason to assign either yourself or other people to issues. So let's look at this. It's about adding an issue. Well, unlike Alex, I don't like working in the GUI. I can use it and it's very nice, but I prefer using the terminal because I'm old school. So hopefully that is visible and legible. You don't really need to see the blue bits, but you do need to see the white bits. Do you want me to make it bigger? Bigger. Bigger? One more? One more? One more. Let's just see what we've got. This is actually usable. 104 columns should be fine. Okay.
Back in my day, we had
80 was perfect. Yeah, I mean, if I couldn't read it on a punch card, I wasn't interested. So I'm in an empty directory, and I'm going to clone a copy of the local repository from GitHub onto my computer, onto this laptop, using the git clone command. So I start typing git clone, and then I need a URL, a location for this repository. And GitHub provides an easy way of doing that. This is a common thing you'll do at the beginning of working on a project. It's this big green code button, You can click on it and it will give you a variety of different URLs that you can use for the variety of different methods that you can copy this repository over. That's kind of extraneous detail that I don't want to get into too much. I've set up an SSH key with GitHub. If you want to know how to do that, come and ask us. So I'm going to use the SSH URL. And I'm going to click this button to copy it to the clipboard. And I'm going to paste it into my terminal. When I hit return, I cross my fingers and it works. And I clone the repository here, and it's put it in a directory ss23-git. If you clone it, you'll get something looking like this as well. And the repository also told me in the README, the very helpful README, as Alex was saying, how to install and indeed run it. So let's just follow these instructions. So I'm going to copy them. Into my clipboard, and I'm just going to paste them straight into my terminal. And this is going to really be a test of this developer's install instructions, because this better work, right? So off we go, and it doesn't work because it's not Python. Oh, it did work. Wow. Why did it work? Anyway, it looked like something went wrong earlier on because the developer had assumed that typing Python would run Python on my computer. This is Windows Subsystem Linux. So, of course, typing Python doesn't run Python because that would be too sensible. Python 3, I think, is what was needed. But I think the rest of the instructions were happy. I don't know why. Let's go back and do this manually because it looks like it's getting a little bit confused. So I'm going to create a virtual environment, but I'm going to use Python 3 minus mvenv. Hang on, I'm in the wrong place. So I'm going to go up to the starting place. So I'm now, as if I had typed git clone https and cd ss23-git. So we're starting from there. But because Windows is rubbish, I'm doing the Python minus mvenv. I'm doing source venv bin activate. Now this is Python stuff. This isn't subject of the talk, so I'm making no apologies for zipping through it. Pip install pytest, and I cd into rpn calc source, have a look round, that looks like a pytest environment. I need to run pytest, and 3 tests pass. If I type pytest minus v, I can see 3 tests, including test subtract, which is the one that Alex just merged in with his pull request. Okay, that looks nice. And we can also test that this application even works. That would be useful to do, right? So let's do Python 3 rpn underbar calc.py. It's not the greatest interface in the world. It's just waiting for me to type a number or something so that it can put it onto the stack. So let's try 10, 2 plus, and p to pop the top item off the stack. I end up with 12. I believe it can also do longer lines of input, so I'm going to do 3, 4, minus, and it gives me an error. Well, I noticed I accidentally hit space twice there. Maybe that's got something to do with it. So let's run that again. Python rpn calc.py. Let's be careful now. 3 space 4 space minus. What should this be? 1, because it's 4 minus 3. But that worked. So let's just check again. 3 space space 4 space minus. Oh my God. Am I obstructing? I can shrink. Well, I can't. I've got bad knees. I'm old. All right. You hear this cracking noise in a minute. And that fails because it's probably too many spaces. All right. We've found a bug. Let's look at the issues. Has anyone already raised this? Because we've got a lot of issues.
Could you also increase the font size in the browser?
Yes, I can. Thank you for that. I do, and then it forgets. How's that? A bit more?
1 or 2 more.
Whoa, look at that. Okay. This looks like an interesting, similar issue. Better handling when ending interactive session. That's It's not quite the same thing, so that's not right. We're checking to see whether the issue has already been raised. We don't want to raise it twice so we can avoid it. Add a unary discard operator, that doesn't sound right. Better error messages on invalid user inputs. From esteemed Professor Orchard. No, that's not the same one, but it's similar. Looks like someone's commented on that as well, saying it's not actually a bug, it won't fix. No, it's not there, so I'm going to very quickly raise an issue. Multiple spaces causes exception. And I say when you type 3 space 4 minus p to pop the stack, you get an exception. Well, okay, it's not the best bug report in the world, but it tells people what you type and what goes wrong, and I'm saying it raises an exception. It clearly shouldn't do that, so I don't need to explain what it should do. If I had lots of time, I would go into detail about what version of Python I was running, more detail about what I'd done, but I'm afraid I'm having to go slightly rapidly through this bit. So, okay, let's make that an issue, or let's label it as a naughty bug. Very good. Submit issue, that joins our many other issues in this repository. Okay, so back to our issue that we're actually trying to fix, which is adding this modulo operator. Okay, so I have checked out the repository and I've got it running. I found a bug, but I've got it running on my local machine. I now need to do some work to add this modulo operator. And as we've said, best practice is to not just work onto the main branch where other people might be trying to work, where you would say, why is it best practice? It's because your commits would be interleaving and overlapping with everybody else's. Glad you asked. So you make a new branch to do your work on. So this is going to be a feature branch that I'm going to do this modulo operator on. So there are a variety of ways of creating a new branch. One nice way I can do, sorry about this, is from GitHub, is from the issue involved, in this case number 3, add modulo operator, there's a little button here, or a little link here saying create a branch for this issue. So I shall click that, and it says, would you like to name the branch 3-modulo operator? Well, I don't like the 3, so I'm going to get rid of that. So whatever your team thinks is reasonable. And the thing is now zoomed in so far I can't see the button, but there's the button, create branch, and this is creating it on GitHub. And GitHub knows that I'm now going to clone this to my local repository, so it helpfully gives me the commands I need to run locally. Git fetch origin, which is going to bring these changes to my local repository but not do anything with them, just keep them there. And then git checkout add modulo operator, which is going to check out a new branch. As we said, this isn't a Git talk, but I'm hopefully reminding people of the Git commands involved here. So if I paste those 2 commands into my terminal and run them, we'll see that the fetch has brought in the new branch, and then it has switched to a new branch, add modulo operator. And this line here, branch add modulo operator set up to track remote branch, is very helpful and important, because what that means is that the local repository is aware of the remote repository that it was cloned from. And when I've pulled this, I checked out this branch as if it were an existing branch. This is mentioned in more detail on the worksheet. And so Git said, he's checked it out as if it already exists. It must be referencing this already existing remote branch. And it set them up to track each other. And that's going to be very useful when I finish doing my work locally. I can push it in a much easier syntax up to the remote repository, as we will see. So now I need to do the work. And because this is not a programming class, I'm going to do that moderately quickly. So I'm going to edit calculator.py. I hit tab there. I'm really sorry. I should be typing everything. And I'm going to scroll down. And I think this is just about legible. It's not massively important if it is not. But these case statements are catching the tokens plus, minus, times, divide, and so on. And I'm going to copy, because I'm lazy, I'm going to copy these 4 lines and paste them in here. And I'm going to change this to a %, as the issue expected to use % as the operator. And I'm going to use the Python built-in % operator to do the modulo. So I'm popping two things, modulo, and then pushing the result back. That looks reasonable. It's using the same order as the subtract and divide, so at least it's consistent. Okay, I will save that. And if I do git status, which you will type a lot when you do command line git, you can see that it tells me I'm on branch add modulo operator, and then I've got a changed file, calculator.py. Well, I just changed it, so that makes sense. And this changed file is not staged for commit, so this means Git is aware that it's changed, but it doesn't know what I want to do with it just yet. It's just letting me know it's changed. Okay, that's good. Now, I just mentioned tests, so it's a good idea to add a test for that modulo operator so that the people merging the change can say, yes, this looks reasonable, and it has a test that works, and also so that the automatic testing can say, yes, this modulo operator is working, and it's still working years later. Indeed, there are schools of thought which say you should write the test first and then write the code that works towards the test, and that's a perfectly valid way of doing it. If that's what you all agree, then do that. You can even train yourself to do that. So I'm going to write tests, test underbar calculate, which I can't spell, calculate.py. And again, I'm going to copy this subtract test, change this function to test modulo, and let's come up with an example. Let's say 7 and 15 and modulo, so that'll be 15 modulo 7, so the answer should be 1. All right. The remainder when you divide 15 by 7 should be 1. Okay, so if I type pytest -v, I get 4 tests and they all pass. That's never going to happen. You're never going to write a test and it just passes like that. This is pre-recorded. So if I type git status, you can see it's now tracking both of my changes. It's aware of them, but they're still not staged for commit. So now I need to commit these changes. And I want to commit them in one commit. These don't make sense on their own independently. I mean, they might, but these ones, not really. So I want one commit to encompass both of these changes. So I'm going to do git add calculator.py and tests test calculate, which I can't spell, .py. And those are added. So now when I do git status, you see they are changes to be committed. I will type git commit. Git invites me to write a, what was it, verbose, terse commit message, which is informative, but only 200 characters long. So I will say add modulo operator and test. And that makes a commit in my local repository. I haven't touched GitHub at all. And I can do git log, and it shows all the commits in this branch, which in this case is just the one, and then the branch joins back onto main, as you can see with those things down the side. And that's the commit we just made. And if I type git status, we can see there are now no changes because the branch is now up to date with all of those changes we made. And it helpfully says your branch is ahead of origin/add modulo operator by 1 commit. Use git push to publish your local commits. Hey, that sounds like a great idea. I'll push my commit up to GitHub, which is in this case origin. That's what Git default calls the remote repository that you clone from. And so I will do that, git push. And because I've set my SSH key correctly, that is now pushed. And if I go over to the GitHub interface, there's a variety of ways we can show this, but on the front page now, Git notes that the add modulo operator branch had recent pushes less than a minute ago. Do I want to make a pull request? Well, I do. So I should just get on and do that. And I'm quite happy with that as a pull request description. I would perhaps put some more details into here about how I implemented this change, but frankly, it's an extremely simple change.
Well, there's an issue.
There's one more thing. I would, yes, this implements feature from issue. and closes issue. If I hit hash here, GitHub gives me a list of the issues for this repository. So if I look,
And here you can actually type, if we're looking for operator, aren't you? If you just type operator, then it does a text search.
you're good at this, Ben.
Yeah, I didn't, someone had to tell me that.
Right. And the nice thing about that is if I preview, it's perhaps a little hard to see, but this is now a link, which GitHub will show me is linked to the modular operator. And if this pull request is accepted and merged into main, because I've said close it, actually, possibly because I've said closes issue 3 without the issue word, that will actually close the issue. So let's create the pull request. It's suggesting Alex do my review. Well, I just reviewed one of his, so he's probably going to scratch my back as well. So Alex.
Yeah, I think that sounds pretty good, Simon. I think that's a fair trade. I can see that
You drop your
I've got
mic
the
box.
microphone on the floor. I'm going to ignore that for a moment.
Don't tread on it. You won't be ignoring it then.
And
By the way, the tests are running. I did do PyTest on the local environment, but it's worth making sure that they do run. It's running the same tests on GitHub. They have now correctly run. I have no conflicts, so I'm good to go.
yeah, I think that's...
Can I press it? Can I press it? Can I press
No, you
it?
can't. I've got to get the
wanna press it.
public trace. Looking good, Simon. Thank you.
Now again, you can do this very formally. You can sit through the code and go through line by line. The pull request has a variety of tabs to show you everything that's changed in enormous detail.
That should be coming your way anytime soon.
Keeping
Simon.
things relatively simple for a 90-minute talk. But yep, there's Alex saying it looks good to him. And one of us, he, I, whoever, could merge the request. So I'm going to merge that. I'm going to hit confirm merge. I think that's me done.
Excellent, Simon. That looks like a lovely piece of work. I think the esteemed Professor Joe Bloggs is going to be even more over the moon. But I have been keeping an eye on time, and we've got that meeting with the Vice-Chancellor, so we've got
that's
to go,
right.
Simon.
Right,
we've
yeah.
got to go. Hold the fort, guys.
Yeah, you just look after our laptops. Make sure nobody touches them.
All right, enough playing around.
Never.
Now, I'm going to steal someone else's laptop to do this. Let's simplify it a little bit.
How are we doing for time?
So, well, my friends are out. I'm actually I'm a different person for the sake of this section. I am not in the. I'm not with ICCS. And so I'm not in the team that has push access to this repository. But I noted this. This was on my radar earlier, and I have a penchant for Python conventions and writing things with nice style. So I went ahead and forked this earlier. Currently we're on the Cambridge one. If I click fork, I think it should show. Alas, it doesn't actually show mine. But let's head on to my fork here. And I've already forked this repository, and I've made a branch and added a quick change. Let's have a look at what this is, and I'm going to look at. We're going to do two things at once because it's most convenient. If we head back to the main repository, we can see that it lets me know there is a branch with a bunch of changes, and it's on a different fork here. Red. Usually there's nothing. If there's nothing in front there, then it's the same repository. Let's have a look. Do the same thing that we've been doing previously. What have we got here? Okay. So instead of merging one branch onto another, we're still merging one branch onto another, but instead of doing it on the same repository, the changes are going to be coming from my fork. So this is how you accept contributions from others who might not be in your team directly. Let's have a look at change. So calculator, rename the stack to use an underscore instead. Snake case is the usual Python convention. Where's my changes? So I was just a bit mean. I think the rest, I know that the rest of the project does use snake case. So for convention purposes, I switched this up. I just wanted my name to commit lots of them. this should pass the tests if it works. So I'll create that pull request. GitHub actually filled in, as well as filling in the title, it also filled in the description for me because I wrote a really descriptive commit message. So, you know what, that would be nice though. I would actually say what I just told you. The rest of the project uses. Okay. And, oh no. Well, I'm going to say goodbye and I'm going to let the others do it.
Oh, Simon, that's why it's really hard to get organic, fair trade coffee that's actually not freeze-dried.
All right, all right. I'm getting so many GitHub notifications that somebody called Drive-By Syntax Pedant has been adding pull requests to our repository. That's very kind of them. I mean, we should always applaud such things, I suppose. Sorry.
Okay, let's see what's actually happened then. Let's have a look at that project and see if we can see any changes here. Right, what's happened? In progress. Ah, there's a new pull request, Simon. Calculator rename the stack. That must be the one you're talking about.
I think so.
Sounds like a pedant to me. Let's have a looky look here. And, oh dear, all checks failed.
Yeah, that wasn't supposed to happen, was it?
No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
No, what's happened? It's happened on a fork as well. That's interesting.
What does it say in the error logs?
The error logs are complaining about the calculator object not having an attribute called the stack.
Oh,
Interesting. Ah, look at that.
I see.
Your modulo operator, Simon. It looks like
That hasn't got changed.
that hasn't changed. Why might that have happened? Let's have a look at the pull request. So if we look at the files changed.
Syntax pedants.
I've done it wrong.
No, you've done it fine.
Oh look, there's no modulo operator here, Simon.
So what's happened is the drive-by syntax pedant has forked the repository, which is perfectly reasonable to do, and made a branch which has this work in which they renamed the stack. And that's gone off up there. Meanwhile, I forked the repository by making a branch add modulo operator, which has gone up there. And I've merged mine back into main, but now this, oh, I made that a bit high. This commit now wants to merge back into main as well, and there's a conflict. And the correct response was for drive-by syntax pedant to rebase their work back up here. That's a little bit sophisticated, so we're not going to go into huge detail about that. So we'll instead show you that this is something that can happen, and there are ways of fixing it, which Alex is working on.
Yeah, I'm going to work, I think, directly today on their remote. So on the remote repository down here, I'm going to rename camel case bar.
So when you make a pull request, when you make it, there's an option, which I think is set by default, which is to allow the parent repository that you have forked from to change your pull requests branch, and so to add commits to your pull request, effectively allowing collaboration from the developers that you're trying to pull request into, allow them to come back. Wow.
Mine have a very, very ugly view here, but
That's better. Now this has gone slightly off script, so it might be that this is irreconcilable right now.
this has gone very, very much off script. Yeah. There's meant to be
Hey-ho.
a modulo operator here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make the change on that branch for Ben. So I'm going to... That's not going to work, is it, Simon? What's going to happen then? I think this is irreconcilable for a moment.
We might just drive past this bit and say these dang syntax pedants, they're just not worth it sometimes. So what was supposed to happen was that the pull request, the test was supposed to go green, because as far as syntax pedants repository was concerned, everything was fine. They hadn't seen this modulo operator code, so their tests were running completely correctly because all the code that they needed to change had been changed. They make the pull request, we see it's got green tests, we merge it, and that's when main goes wrong, because our tests, still working, pick up that modulo operator, which is nestling away in there, hasn't been changed by syntax pedant's changes, because syntax pedant hasn't seen it. And so you end up with main failing tests, which is like, oh, it can be, oh my God, that's panic, or it can be, oh, well, this happens, it's Wednesday. Again, it might be, if it's a very critical piece of code, you really don't want broken code on your main branch. If it's academic code, you might say this does sometimes happen and we try and avoid it. The fixes can be to revert that merge, which is basically add another merge on top of it, which undoes it and puts things back the way they were. Or, as we were going to do, add a fix to drive-by syntax pedant's repository, effectively rebasing it, and then merge that in and make things go green. But something went wrong because it's a live test, and I think we're going to bail on this. Right?
I think I might have just fixed it. But
Oh, you fixed
I
it?
also don't think I fixed it the correct way. But I think we have a...
Well, I've explained it anyway. So
Yeah, it was as elegant and intended.
So to note, those sorts of cases can often crop up if you've got a bunch of different team members working on a single repository, doing different things at the same time.
Yeah.
It's a valid way of working. It may well come up. The best way to avoid weird situations like that are, when possible, when you're pushing your code, or more like when you're about to ask to have your code reviewed or merged, try to make sure that it's up to date with wherever you're merging it to. Because that was the issue with the, though that little test there went wrong, it still proved our point that if you're not up to date with main, then you might have issues. We tried to show you, we were going to show you a really horrible issue that Simon said. It was the tests were going to be green, we'd merge, and then the tests would go red. Instead, we got the nicer version, where the tests actually failed first.
Yeah. Ben, you seem to know a lot about merge conflicts. Do you have 10 minutes to talk about one more specific difficult challenge?
Yes.
Also, the other take-home message is put automatic tests in your repository. They will absolutely save your life.
Yeah. So we'll let Ben go through this last merge conflict, and then we'll go through your issues that you've been submitting through the session.
We'll let Ben try and redeem himself.
Yes, this one is harder to make go wrong.
That's not plugged in. Do you want it to be?
No, I can use any one.
Okay.
Okay. So in the background, I've added yet another branch that's made yet more changes to this repository. Already we can see, because we've been talking about similar stuff, this branch doesn't look like it's up to date at all. 11 minutes behind main. Say we didn't realise this, and we made a pull request for it regardless. So base main, we're comparing it to integer mode. Here we go. Immediately, GitHub tells us it can't automatically merge it. Even if the previous problem, the tests were failing, but GitHub would have obliged and just given us a broken repository. Because it was happy enough to compare two histories and figure out a simple way of reconciling them. There were no, for example, one line was changed in both commits, for example. In this case, the conflicts are different. So there's probably a couple of lines which are changed multiple times. So, which are different on both main and on my branch. I'm going to make the pull request first, and then we can have a look at the diff inside it. Okay. Convert from using floats to integers. Let's have a look at it first. Gives us an idea of what's going on, I hope. So, all right. Instead of reading floats, we were rereading the integers, and I've replaced the division operator with integer division. In Python, that just floors the result, I think. So 3 over 2 instead of 1.5 is 1. This might be useful, might not be, but this is my. Let's keep going. So when you have a conflict like this, which you can't resolve automatically, there is no choice but to resolve it manually. This can happen, and it probably will happen, and it's a real pain, even when you're used to using Git. It's fairly irritating. Today I'm going to show you just the way to use GitHub to resolve conflicts. I've only really ever used the command line interface to resolving these sorts of things, but simple conflicts, hell, even fairly complex ones, you can resolve on GitHub fairly happily, and probably with a bit less Git food, because everything's a little bit more in front of you. So, let's briefly read this over. Conflicts that must be resolved. There are two files conflicting. Those are both the files that will change. I'm going to press resolve conflicts, and we get thrown into an editor. Okay. So, starting off with calculator.py, I think we made like 2 or 3 changes here. Right, I'm scrolling down, and this whole bit from line 35 to 50 is the chunk, or actually I think the hunk, formally, the hunk of this file where in both histories that we're trying to merge, on both main, on the primary repository, and on my own branch, or my own, it's not actually on the full, but on both branches, these lines have changed. So they've changed twice. So there's no way for Git to reconcile because it doesn't know which one you might want to use. So we have to do the reconciliation ourselves. Let's have a look. The way that the syntax kind of works here is that the after the chevrons tells you the following branch. So the stuff between the first set of chevrons and the equal signs is everything on the integer mode branch, and then below that, till the rest of the chevrons, is the stuff on main. So we're trying to merge integer mode into main here. So let's look at that. Well, we want to have everything in integer mode in main. So let's start off with, I can see here, these 3 lines are the old division. I'm not interested in that, we can remove these. Okay. Here I can see something else. The stack, the variable that we renamed, that hasn't propagated here, so clearly this branch was made before that was merged. How am I doing for time, by the way?
A couple of minutes.
Right, buddy?
Clock there.
Okay, no worries. So, rename the stack. I'm not gonna. Yeah, sure. I'll do my best. I'll do my best. This is exactly the kind of feeling doing these conflicts is anyway. It's kind of just manual labor stuff. It's often really boring. Okay, the other thing is now we have 2 of these. Right, that's okay. I'm skipping this. I'm not interested. Right, the other simpler conflict on integer mode. We read tokens. We read stuff that doesn't match another operator as an integer. On main, we read it as a float. The problem is, again, the renamed variable. It's the only difference. So we update, and we get rid of, all of the other lines. Okay. We would do the same for the other problem. I'm gonna half-ass it, and we'll see if it works because we have automated tests, kind of saving us. Oh look, I already can see I removed a bracket somewhere. That looks about right. I've missed the stack here. Sure. Sure. That looks good enough, and we should be told if there's an issue. I click markers resolved in the top right, and then the other bit we're going to have to deal with are the tests. These have just been changed from floats to integers. So the first one, not interested. And these next ones would need converting, but I'm going to skip that. So the tests will probably fail, but we know where to go from here, and it'll at the very least be all up to date.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I think that's a very hands-on way of doing a merge, but sometimes you've got to get your hands dirty, I guess. Right. I think we have done a good amount of work here, guys. I think we've been going for, I made this 80 minutes straight. We've been working. That's a crazy long day, that is. Unbelievable. Let's go back to my project board to wrap up. So, a lot of stuff's happened here. So, esteemed Professor Joe Blocks, we're very happy with all these done items over here. So we've completed our unit test, we've added our modular operator, and we've got the issues and the PRs being tracked there, and we've renamed the stack to the right name. This is great. Someone's gone around and assigned some in-progress stuff. For someone taking on these minimum version checks, we can actually review the status of these. Looks like they have been, a change has been made. Excellent, that's why they're in progress. So they're awaiting review. So right now we start prioritising next day's work items. So this is something that's in review, and if you don't fix that quickly, that will decay and become stale and need maintenance. As more changes are added back to main, you'll need to pull them down to your branch. So that's good that that's high priority. We've got to convert from using floats to integers that Ben was working on. We've left that half open, that makes sense. The to-do items, we've got some add matrix of Python versions to CI. That makes sense. This is for better extensive testing, right? Who wrote this? Christopher Edsel. Exactly. Multiple versions of Python, even better. Yeah, okay. We should do this. Simon, can I assign this to you?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. So I'm going to assign this to Simon and put this in the to-do column. That's his next work item, I think. I can't press a button. And this is how we sort of do. I think you sort of clear up after you've done some amount of work, you tidy up and you re-evaluate the situation. So we've got some no status items here to provide better error messages on invalid user inputs. Guys, what do you reckon this one would classify? Is that an enhancement, do you reckon? Yep, that's been labelled as an enhancement. Excellent. Thank you very much, Don, for marking that one up. And this is what you could. You've got to stay on top of these these issues as they come in. And sort of work out what we're doing. Are we going to do that soon, or are we going to leave that on backlog? Do you reckon?
Backlog, yeah.
Backlog, okay, cool. We're not going to do anything with that for now. Unary discard operator, sorry, Don. Lots of enhancements here, this is great. So we're just marking up stuff so that we can do the admin later. And this is really the power, I think, of the project board, so we can sort of decide what we're going to do, not going to do, and let people know what's in the pipeline. And then generally, this is what GitHub's great for. Issue tracking, public PRs, and collaboratively developing code across distributed teams. Thank you everyone for listening. We have provided some resources in a handout, Simon, if you could. They are dotted around the room. You may have been given a copy. For those online, there will be a link in the Slack. I think you might have neglected to have done that, but there will be a link in the Slack. And you not only have information about setting up a repository and forking, you're doing your homework task to test your knowledge, and lots of how-to instructions as well.
Yeah, so this repository will stay live, and we will keep an eye on it throughout the summer school. So if you guys want to play with it, add issues, feature requests, pull requests, fork it, play with it as you see fit, please do, and we will keep an eye on it and interact with it.
And you can come around and chase us
That too.
if you've got any issues. Excellent, thank you everyone. And if you've got any questions, we've got 5 minutes.